All right. Well, good to be with everyone as we are walking through the book of Daniel. We've just been talking about that first question on the study guide of what's difficult about speaking boldly to those in authority. Before we just talk about that for a minute, let's go ahead and open with the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for all the blessings that you give. Thanks for the love that you provide for us in Jesus. Lord, as we study Daniel, just open our hearts and minds so that we will learn what you want us to know. Let us see how in the book of Daniel, it points clearly to your Son, our Savior. But also, Lord, help us to see how in Daniel, we see how we can live in a world that is not friendly to you so often. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right. So any thoughts on that question? What's difficult about speaking boldly to those in authority? Anything that you discussed in your group, want to share with the larger group here as we kind of talk? Yeah. So often can be afraid of repercussions. How are they going to react? What are they going to say? Are there going to be negative consequences for me or those around me if I speak boldly to those in authority? Other thoughts? Yeah, Ron?
Sometimes it's like a two-edged sword in that we have been trained or brought up with the idea that you respect those in authority. And plus that, maybe they know more than I do anyway. So what right do I have to give my opinion?
So that challenge of respecting those in authority while still speaking boldly, wondering our own value, our own opinion, and how that weighs in the midst of all of those things. Yeah, all that can be challenging. Other thoughts? Yeah, Ed?
They really don't want to hear what you have to say.
So then they may not be interested, they may not be interested in what you have to say. Depending on the person that's in authority, they may not care about what you have to say. I'm sure we've all been around people in authority that don't care. Hopefully we've also been around people that do want to hear what you have to say too at the same time. So yeah, thanks for that. As we go, that happens in the book of Daniel. We're going to see Daniel struggling with those in authority as we go today. So let's go ahead and get into reading Daniel. We're going to pause kind of at the end of the first chapter and talk about kind of when it was written and why and all those kinds of things. But I want to get through that first chapter together to give us some background and some flavor before we kind of talk about what this looks like. So can somebody read for us Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 7?
I can read, Pastor.
Jean, you got that?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Jean. Go ahead.
In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim of Judah, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, Azariah he called Abednego.
All right, nice job with those names, Gene. That's great. Yeah, great job with that. So just as we're looking at those, so we have Daniel, we know that one. And then Daniel was Belteshazzar. And then we know Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but it's actually Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, sorry, as in the same order as we go. Are called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So that's those are the players that are mostly in here. So we have, as it sets the stage, we've got this deportation where the people from Judah have to go to Babylon. And so that takes place actually before the fall of Babylon in 587 BC. Sorry, the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BC. There are actually probably 3 different deportations that take place. So let's just set the stage here. We're looking at probably summer of 605 BC. So that's probably when we're looking. And here's what's going on in the world. Babylon is rising to power. They're becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And the king of Babylon's son is a guy named Nebuchadnezzar. He's prince of Babylon. And he is taking dad's army and going out to meet a threat of a coalition of nations and peoples that are trying to put a stop to the spread of the Babylonian Empire. The head of this coalition is Egypt. And so Egypt has gathered those around it to make a stand against Babylon, and they've marched north towards the Euphrates River. And they've gathered with them kings of places like Syria, kings of places like Judah, Jerusalem. And these kings and armies are gathered together to try to make one show of force to stop Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar comes and he meets them head on with the armies of Babylon, and it's not even a contest. He wipes them out. And then so he begins to march south into their lands, solidifying, conquering fully. Their main army is wiped out. So this is not a huge task here in 605 BC after the main battle has taken place. In the midst of this, Nebuchadnezzar gets news that dad's died. He is the successor to the throne, but to make sure that that happens smoothly, that transition of power happens well, he returns home. Probably not with his whole army, but at least a contingent of them. He solidifies power, and then he comes back to take care of these nations and kings that rose up against him now. And so during this time, this is 605, Jehoiakim is king, and he captures Jerusalem. Jehoiakim basically says, hey, yeah, you already defeated our army. We thought Egypt was going to be able to protect us. They can't. So Nebuchadnezzar, don't destroy us. We'll do whatever you want. And so Nebuchadnezzar says, great. You got to come back to Babylon, swear allegiance to me. We're going to take the best and brightest of your family and the officials' sons, and we're going to bring them back to Babylon to serve in our country. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay us tribute every year. And as a kind of down payment on that, we want the gold vessels out of the temple, all of the gold articles that are there. Jehoiakim says, okay. And that's what happens. And so this first wave of deportees includes Daniel and his friends, members of the nobility or members of the educated officials, their families, their sons. They're taken to Babylon. All right. They're given royal treatment and they're educated. They're going to be educated for how long? 3 years. So these are young men when they go. Probably 12, 13, 14, 15 at most, probably in the midst of that. All right, they've gone through their religious education. You can think of bar mitzvahs and all that kind of stuff. They've had all of that. They're already the most educated people in Israel because they're being groomed for leadership in the next generation. And they're taken to Babylon and they're given a 3-year indoctrination, high school, all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's what's happened there. They're taken to the plain of Shinar. That's the old name for Babylon, for Babylonia. It's where on the plain of Shinar was where the people were building the Tower of Babel. So Daniel's readers would immediately think back to, oh, these are people, this is a place where people don't listen to God, right? This is where they're going. So that's kind of setting the stage for us there. And so we have the names of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel, his name means my judge is God. That's what Daniel's name means. My judge is God. That word El at the end of Daniel's name is the Hebrew word for God. Elohim is the plural form of God, in which how God refers to himself. I, the Lord your God, Elohim, am one. So using the plural form says he's one in the midst of Scripture. So my God is my judge. Hananiah means gracious is Yah. Hananiah, Yah. Gracious is Yah. Gracious is Yahweh. That's Yah is short for Yahweh. Mishael means who is what God is. Like who is like God? Who is what God is? Implying the answer, no one, with the L at the end of his name. And Azariah means Yah or Yahweh has helped. Now, their names reflect a faith in the Hebrew God, Yahweh, the true God. What do the Babylonians do? Change their names. And then they make them all after Babylonian gods. And there's some questions that specifically what each one means, but each one has a Babylonian god connected to their Babylonian name. Daniel's name Belteshazzar. Bel is one of the Babylonian gods, and it might mean something like, where did it come from? Sorry. Bel, like it's close to Belshazzar, which is protect the king, but it's kind of like may Bel protect me or something like that. The Shadrach comes from the Babylonian god Aku, the end of that Ak or Aku, and so it's kind of like the command of Aku, the command of this god. That's Aku is the Babylonian moon god. Meshach, his name was who is like who is what God is, kind of changed. So it's kind of like who is what Aku is. So they kind of change it to mean not who is like God, but who is like the moon god. And then Abednego, is similar to Nebo, which is one of the Egyptian gods, the Egyptian god of wisdom and agriculture. The same God whose Nebuchadnezzar has in his name, Abednego, would be servant of Nebo, was what Abednego means. And so they're changing their names and they're put into school. Why is that going on? What's the reason? Yeah, or question, comment, thought, Mom?
I think it's interesting that Daniel's able to keep his given name, but the other three are not.
Kind of. I think it's kind of how it's recorded and how it looks, and we'll see as we go and read through the first two chapters. Often when Daniel's referring to them directly, they're using their Hebrew names. And when they're in the context of government or in the king's presence, we often will hear their Babylonian names, even with Daniel in the first two chapters. And so there's, so probably they always, when they're in company with one another, they probably use their Hebrew names. When they're in company with others, they probably use their Babylonian names. Why would they given different names to deflect focus from the true God? But why else? Why are they giving these names? Why the culture? Why the enculturation? Why the school? Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I'm remembering how oftentimes when the European settlers came across North America and ran across Indian tribes, they would capture or somehow, get these Indian kids and they would change their names to, European style.
Yeah.
It's a way, I guess, just to, like you said, enculturate them.
Yeah. Assimilate them. Yeah. Many, if you have history that goes back where family members came through Ellis Island, that happened too. My grandfather's last name was Chronopoulos. He's from Greece. Yeah, and that was changed to Cronus. One of his cousins, they changed that to Cole. to make them even more Americanized in the midst of those things. So it's to enculturate, to make them be part, to not stand out, to be like everyone else. That's part of it. Why else are the names are other things? Yeah.
In Genesis, Adam names the animals to show his authority over them.
Yeah.
Name something you have control or ownership over. So maybe it was a way for Babylon to say, we're in charge here. You'll go by our name.
Yeah. Names have power, authority. That's part of it. Yeah.
Thinking that it was probably a negative thing, try to strip them of their identity.
Yeah.
Somebody takes away your birth name and changes it to whatever they want. Very, the word I don't know, it's very.
Oppressive. Yeah. But yeah, it is this idea of this power, this authority, stripping you of your identity, anything that ties you back to your land, to your God, to your people, so that you can be like them. The same thing is the goal of this 3-year schooling, isn't it? What are they learning? The Babylonian language, Akkadian. They're learning what else? The literature. So they're okay. You have your Hebrew fairy tales. Those, fairy tales. Let's teach you all the stories of the true gods here in Babylon. Make sure you know all of those things, all of the literature, all of the stories, all of the songs, all of the ways that the right ways to worship and to act and to behave, the right etiquette in all of these different situations, as well as politics and writing and grammar and all of these things about being leaders. They're indoctrinating them not only into their culture, their religion, but they're also making them Babylonian as best as they can. That's the goal of this 3-year period. So that's what's going on. All right, let's keep going. So you have these 4 guys, amongst others, probably other refugees from Israel, but also from Syria and Lebanon and Egypt and all these probably other places that are been captured and brought here that are part of the school. Let's just kind of talk about this. Can somebody read for us 8 through 16 of chapter 1? Thank you.
That he would not defile himself with the king's rich food or with the wine which he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear lest my lord the king, who appointed your food and your drink, should see that you were in poorer condition than the youths who are of your own age. So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's rich food be observed by you. And according to what you see, deal with your servants. So he hearkened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's rich food. So the steward took away their rich food and wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so let's just unpack this account here as we look at Daniel and his friends in the midst of this. So what's the dilemma? What's the dilemma for Daniel and his friends? They don't want to eat the king's rich food. Are they just picky eaters? What's going on here? Why is that a big deal? Food wasn't, equivalent prepared to the Jewish laws. Who gave them those laws? God, right? This is the things that God said, this is what you are to eat and to do, to be set apart, to be my people, to be clean, all of those kinds of things to follow. Today that's called kosher, right? That idea. And so is it really about the food? Or is it about following God, right? Yeah, so this is where they've kind of drawn a line, at least. Yeah, Tom.
They had trouble with wine.
I don't know, Tom.
Because you can't have unkosher wine.
Right. I don't know.
Strange.
Yeah. But whether it was kind of the whole gamut of like, it's all or nothing, in the midst of those things as well. So,
Do we know what the
rich foods were, no, but we
just need non-kosher?
probably, if you're looking at the diet practice of the day, what did most people eat as their main staple? Most people ate bread. The diet for every common person still today around the world is usually some kind of grain product, bread. Some places of the world it's rice, but it's a grain product, right? That's the most common food for most people. And when you have this third world societies and you think back to ancient world, that's what people ate, is they ate bread.
Are there any non-kosher breads?
I don't know. But you look at that's what most people are eating, as opposed to if you're now in the king's palace, what do the kings and the wealthy people get to eat all the time? Meat. Other people ate meat, but man, that was not all the time. We eat meat almost every day in almost every meal. That's a recent thing. We by that being our practice, we're eating like kings. I mean, that's really it's kind of foreign to our concept. And so for Daniel to eat like a king means that he's, and to have that food of the kings means that they're eating rich foods. They're having meat with every meal. And as much as we kind of do that, that's probably, as some of us are finding out, or doctors are saying, hey, maybe that's not the right balance. Right? And Daniel kind of uses that approach, doesn't he? Hey, maybe there's a different balance we can do if we're eating, so if you look at someone who's only eating grains, are they getting a lot of minerals and vitamins and those things just from that? Is someone who's eating meat going to be getting better minerals and vitamins than person just eating bread? Yeah. I'm not a dietitian. I don't pretend to be one, but just that kind of helps us explain a little bit. Now, if you're eating a plant-based diet and some of those things, maybe there's some meat sprinkled in there, but Daniel kind of just delineates this very black and white. They're getting more minerals, more more of those things that they need.
Maybe the idea here is he's saying it's not so much, because there's nothing non-kosher about wine.
Right.
But maybe it's not so much fact that this is bad food or unclean food, is the fact that we don't take our orders from you, we take our orders from God. Yeah. And he told us to eat this stuff. Yeah. So that's what we're doing.
And there probably would be, as far as the meat goes, there would be unkosher pork, all those kinds of things would be part of this. And so, where do you draw the line? How do you delineate and explain that to somebody who doesn't care, in the midst of that? Yeah, Gail?
I was just thinking it was very honorable, respectful, and suggested it's a way to solve the issue. Didn't come out.
Right. So he first asked the head steward, the guy in charge of all of them, hey, can we do this? He's like, no way. You can't do this, because if I see you looking worse than the other ones, okay, Daniel is like, okay, the issue is not what I eat. The issue is my health. So he goes to the next guy down. He's like, hey, can we just do this? No, I don't want to. If this has happened, the king says you have to eat this so you look good and you're healthy. Hey, how about we do a test? Hey, just for a week. And if we're not as healthy as the other guys, okay. So Daniel's trying his best to honor the authority that God has given him, but also honor his greater authority in God. This is a first commandment. Does he love, trust in God above all things? The chief officials, they have the dilemma. They don't want to be in trouble. They don't want these youths to be in not good condition because they have a different diet. They don't know all that we know about nutrition. I don't know everything about nutrition, but that's what's going on. For whatever reason, the food from the king's table was objectionable to Daniel because of what God had called them to do. And so they make an agreement. They're in better condition. And so they're able to eat in that God honoring way. That's what's resolved in the midst of this. So how does God, in just this account right here, help Daniel and his friends be faithful? Daniel's bold. Daniel speaks boldly to authority, but also respectfully. But how does God help Daniel and his friends be faithful? They looked healthy after 10 days. Healthier. Not just the same, they were better. It was clear. How else? To Ed's point earlier, right? Is everybody in authority willing to listen or bend or experiment? Did he make their people in authority over them willing to listen and take a chance? Yeah. That's pretty amazing too. If we think about some of the rigid people that maybe we've worked for or worked with, that's pretty amazing too. That God allowed them, gave them soft enough hearts for Daniel and his friends to be able to follow, to even try this agreement.
The last verse there, 16, says they took away their food. Is that just 4, or is that all of the youth?
I think that's, I don't know for sure what that referent is. I think that usually is read just the 4. Yeah. Yeah.
Because if it was for everybody, the others might not have liked that.
Might not have liked that so much. You're exactly right. And so the risk for Daniel and his friends too, right? They're risking the ire of their leaders, but they are singling themselves out from all of their peers. So this is a way that they're not fitting in. That's difficult. That's hard. All right, let's keep going on. What happens at the end of, so kind of first crisis avoided. Are some things about Daniel and his friends, are they being enculturated into a point? Sure. Are they learning faithfully and diligently what these things that they're taught? Yeah. Does it mean they're buying into them? No, we see that clearly at this episode. Are they still holding their identity as God's children, even in the midst of other things? Yeah. And so with Daniel, we get this delicate balance of how and what we can do of still being, when we live in a world around us where the culture is not for the Lord, how do we still live for the Lord? And Daniel shows us as we walk through this that you can be part of some things while still remaining faithful in main things. You know, yeah. Did it make them less? The bad ones were trying to put a power play and take their identity away with changing their names. Was their identity changed when their names were changed? Did they probably like that? No, but did they know that that didn't really change who they were? When they saw following God's command or not following God's command, they said, well, this will change our identity. We want to follow God's command. And so they did. And that's where we see the rub come throughout the other places. They work in the government. They work for these pagan kings. They help them in their day-to-day life. But when it comes to their own actions for worshiping God, their identity as God's children, that's where they draw the line. And so we'll kind of wrestle with that and see that as we move forward here. Can somebody read for us 17 through 21? Yeah, thank you.
God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, so they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus.
Great, thank you so much. So what happens at the end of 3 years? They get their examination so they can get their diplomas. Yeah. And is this, okay, comprehensive exam? Yeah, but who's the proctor? The king. Yeah, the repercussions for that, maybe just cuts them off. Maybe they're shipped back to some backwoods corner. Maybe who knows what happens here. But at the end of that, King Nebuchadnezzar tests them talks with them, converses with them, and what's what's the result? 10 times better than everyone else. Is that 10 times a literal number or a figurative number, do you think? Everybody else got 10% on the exam, but they got 100%. It's figurative. It means they went above and beyond. They were far superior than everyone else, right? Right. So we can use numbers in a literal way and a figurative way. Do we do that still today? And we can look at those things to understand what that looks like, right? I bring that up because later in Daniel, there are some numbers in some of the visions. And some people say, well, that has to be a literal number because it's in God's word. Like, wait, Daniel's using a number in a figurative way already here in the first chapter. Now, it's not in a vision part, but he's using that in a figurative way. We need to understand numbers can be used literally and figuratively. And we can look at the context and help some of those clues to figure out what that looks like and what that means. So Daniel is, he says he's there in the courts of the kings until when? The first year of King Cyrus. Now Cyrus is a Persian king. That's like 70 years later than this account, which gives us kind of a clue to maybe when Daniel was written. The traditional view, the view that that most conservative scholars hold, is that Daniel was the author of this. And so Daniel probably is writing it, or at least finishing Daniel, at the end of his life, probably after he is finished serving in Cyrus's house, right? At least in this section, that part there that he writes was written at the end of Daniel's service, and maybe reflecting back on all of the things, how God has been faithful to him and to the visions and to the kings and his service and their recollections of God's work in that time.
He's been quite old.
Yes.
Because I think it's something like 60 years.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that a little
70
bit.
years.
Yeah. So Daniel's in a unique place to record the events that are there. He's kind of in the courts of the kings during this time. He'd have been trained in Aramaic, Babylonian, which is Akkadian. He'd have been trained previously in Jewish thoughts and languages. He has authority during the realms of many of these kings that follow him. After King Nebuchadnezzar, there are 4 Babylonian kings before the Persians come. We're going to talk about more of that history as it comes into play. In his book, there are 2 different genres. There is this narrative genre, this narrative historical kind of genre that we just read through. And then there are visions, where Daniel has visions of things that happened. And so it's much more like this prophecy kind of stuff. Even similar themes, if you studied Revelation with us a few years ago, some of those kind of imagery things will pop up here. But it's woven together, the book of Daniel. It's chronologically interlocked. And so some of the things that we've read in here, they're kind of circular sometimes, and it's not organized chronologically. One of the things that holds Daniel together is that it's all chronologically. So what happened first, Daniel records first, and where those visions took place, he inserts them into the chronology of that. And so you have narratives and visions, and then back to narratives, and then back to visions, because that's when each of those things happened. That's one of the things that locks Daniel, that points to the unity of Daniel, and the structure of Daniel holds together that way. Again, says he served until the first official year of Cyrus. That's spring of 538 or 537, somewhere in that range. And so 605 to 537, we're talking 70, 80 years in that range. So the final version of Daniel's book that he composed was after the conquest of Babylon by Persia. So probably written sometime between 536 to 530 BC. Daniel's probably in his 80s when he's writing this and finishing this. So he served 65, 75 years in public service in these foreign countries. That would put the writing of this book at the same time when the second temple is being built back in Jerusalem. As Zerubbabel goes back and builds the temple under the permission and the guidance of Cyrus that's there.
He's kind of a link between the two periods.
He really is the pre-exilic to the post-exilic. Daniel's in Babylon through it all, and his book gives us that link between both. Exactly right, Tom.
Do you have any idea how old he was when he came to Babylon?
We're not told, but if they talk about young youths,
Does that have is it like a word of art where it means a particular age?
not necessarily, but kind of the best guess or conjecture probably is they're that bar mitzvah age, 12, 13, 14, is probably a realistic guess.
About your son's age.
About my son's age, about Nathan's age. Yeah. And so, yeah, they've had that enculturation, probably that training. Again, they're the brightest and best of the youths in Judah. They've been trained because they're being groomed for service, either as nobility or as officials.
So when I think about Nathan and then think about our dear friend who just passed away, Martin.
Yeah,
that's kind of the
bookend of the ages that are there. Yeah, absolutely. And Daniel lived a faithful life, not without challenges, through all of those things that are there. The link between the pre-exile, we call that exilic, and post-exile, post-exilic. So that they're in Babylon. Again, Daniel comes during that first deportation. There's a couple times where Nebuchadnezzar has some struggles politically. And so the kings of Judah say, oh, this is our chance to get out from under the thumb of Nebuchadnezzar. That doesn't work so well. The second time they do that, Jerusalem is completely destroyed in 587, 586 BC. And then they're in Babylon, but then Cyrus the Persian allows some of them to return home and rebuild the temple. And so Daniel kind of is the very front end of that, and then is the very back end of that as well. Okay. There are other opinions from scholars that try to say, well, Daniel couldn't possibly have written this book. Well, what's their main reason? Well, there are things in Daniel that if he wrote it when he said he wrote it, Daniel was able to correctly predict the future. And they say, well, that's just not possible. Nobody can know and predict the future. They deny true prophecy. And so they say, well, it had to have been written after that. After those things began to come true, somebody was writing it back and kind of co-opting the history and making that the case, right? And so that's why they try to construct a later time of when it was written. And so they try to push it as late as they can. But there are just things in that just don't make sense. Some of the language that's used, even if you don't deny prophecy, which we don't, we know that God is in control of history, one of the themes of Daniel, that there are things with the language, things with the culture, other things like that. And then extra biblical things, the Qumran community. You maybe heard me talk about that if you've been in Bible study with me before, where the Qumran scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. One of the books that's found there is a copy of Daniel. And the copy of Daniel that dates to near the end of the 2nd century BC, so 120-ish BC, which is where they're trying, and these folks, they're trying to push it later, try to say Daniel was written maybe about 165, 40 or 50 years earlier. The struggle is the Qumran community already in 125 BC, they write about the works and they write about these prophets, and they ascribe this, and they are conservative in their thoughts and their approach to those things. They lump Daniel in with the prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah and put him on the same level, where if it had only been written 40 years before, it could not have been elevated that highly in their eyes. But they're seeing this as Daniel, even though they have a copy that's supposedly of these critical scholars, only 40 years removed from the autograph. And it's just not plausible for that to happen. There's other arguments and other things that point to a date that could happen as early as the time when Daniel wrote, linguistically, historically, otherwise, which just lends credence to, yeah, Daniel wrote it at the time when it makes sense that he wrote it according to the cues and the clues we have in the book of Daniel. All right. Just wanted to throw that out there in case you hear other things or think about other things in the midst of that. Yeah, Mom.
Well, verse 17, it says, when he was to this examination before the king, that Daniel had particular skills in visions and dreams.
Right.
So, that.
The clues in the text point to this already, that Daniel is not just wise, but God has given the ability for visions and dreams. Who else have we heard about in the Old Testament that has that same ability? Joseph. And there are a lot of parallels between Joseph and Daniel. Forcibly taken from his home, forced to work for others, does his very best, is put in morally compromising situations where he doesn't want to violate his morals and his integrity, right? Always gives credit to God. And God uses him not only to save and uses them to save and help a foreign people in the midst of that, even as he helps his own people. Yeah, so there's a lot of parallels between Joseph and Daniel. Any other thoughts, comments, questions on the book or the writing of Daniel itself? There's one thing I haven't mentioned yet, but I'm going to save it for this next section. All right. Can somebody read for us chapter 2, verses 1 through 11? Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
The second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servant the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and the interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. They answered the second time and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time is changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth that can meet the king's demand. For no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh.
All right, thank you for that. As we look here, this happens probably the fall of 603 or the winter of 603 to 602 BC, in the second year of the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. Oh, and when we look at the datings of the things here, if you kind of would look in the parallel account in Jeremiah about when that first deportation happens, Daniel says in the first chapter that it happened in the third year of Jehoiakim. Jeremiah says it happens in the fourth year. Is one of them wrong?
No, they count the years differently.
Yeah, they're just counting the years differently. All right, so the Jewish way to count when kings ascend is, say I was made king, coronated in November. That would be my first year, and when January came, that would be my second year. The Babylonian or Persian way to do that would be my first year wouldn't be until January. And so that's why there's the discrepancy. Jeremiah being in Jerusalem and still going in those places is using that Jewish way of reckoning reigns. Daniel being in Babylon and Persia is using the Babylonian way to do that. So don't let that fool you. So now we got the second full year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign. So that puts it into kind of that fall of 603 to the winter of 603, 602. Has this dream. And then the Chaldeans respond to the king in Aramaic. This is the language, lingua franca. This is what the people all speak, is Aramaic. And from this point on, Daniel records his narrative and his visions in Aramaic until you get to when he's no longer serving the kings. And now it's in Hebrew again. So it starts off in Hebrew. He enters the king's service. It's now in Aramaic. When he leaves the king's service, it's now in Hebrew again. That's one explanation for why that's in both languages. Not the only one, but that's one of the explanations that's there. So it's written in both Hebrew and in Aramaic as we go. Did you notice that change as you read in English? No, I didn't either. So, but that's just as you're going through the originals, that's there.
Are there any other Old Testament books where part of it is written in Aramaic?
I'm not remembering that for sure, Tom, one way or the other. Dad, do you remember that for sure? Yeah, I think there's one other section of a book, but I don't remember which one. Yeah, I don't remember for sure. I'll have to look that up and get back to you. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Dad.
This is still in the year of Daniel's 3 years of reign.
This would be near the end of 603. This is right at the end. So it's probably right after Daniel has finished that.
Because he was before the 605.
Yeah, so
It's the 603, maybe even 602.
so it's the fall, the winter of that year. So probably right after he's the folks put that together chronologically. So Nebuchadnezzar, he has a dream. That's what happens to him. And he wants to know the interpretation. So what do? You call your wise men forward to give you the interpretation. This is what they do. Some of them are trained in philosophy and the natural sciences. Some of them would be trained in the supernatural things, magic, divination. None of that would have a negative connotation. This is what your wise men did. Your magicians. The word there is magi. Okay. That's what we're talking about here. Your advisors. Some of them do by this extraordinary means, supernatural means. Some of them are just doing the regular kind of thing, right? Daniel, does he have extraordinary powers? He can interpret dreams, right? In the world of the Babylonians, is that the same as what their guys do? They do the same thing? In their eyes, it is. Now, Daniel, we know he gets that power and ability from God. If it's not from God, what's the other choice? The devil, right? So we have that distinction. Daniel's readers would know that distinction. But the Babylonians, they see it all as the same kind of supernatural power coming from the gods. There are multiple gods with multiple powers and things. We know it's Yahweh or the devil. They see it as just multiple gods. They don't distinguish between what that looks like. All right. So that's kind of where the playing field is here as we go. Not every wise man would have been dabbling in those supernatural things. They'd have had other specialties, agriculture or building or whatever that might be, military. But some of them, that was seen as another option for some of them that had that ability. And so Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. He calls his wise men in to interpret it. They say, great, we'll be happy to do that. We've done this before. Tell us your dream and we'll let you know what it means. Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, we've gone through this before. I'm not buying it. I want to know that you have the ability to really know for sure what this means. So I'm not going to tell you my dream. You need to tell me what my dream was and then tell me the interpretation. Then I'll know you're telling me the truth. If you really have this supernatural power, this should be easy. Go. They're like, no king has ever asked that of their wise men. Who do you think you are? Probably not a good thing. You're like, well, I'm the king, and what I say goes. If you don't do this, you're going to be killed because I know you're lying to me or will lie to me if I tell you my dream. And they said, we can't do this. And there's an ironic thing to their response, right? We can't do this. Only the gods can do this.
Dwelling is not with flesh.
Whose dwelling is not with flesh, right? There's so many things that are like, man, they're so close to the truth, but yet so far, right? There's a lot of irony there. For God, is this an easy thing? For Yahweh, the true God? Yeah, because he's the one that gave Nebuchadnezzar the dream in the first place. He's the one that gave Pharaoh the dream way back, right? This is an easy thing for God. So they're close. Only the gods can do this. Yeah, only the true God can do this. And as he's the one who gave the dream in the first place. So he gives this dream to Nebuchadnezzar so that his power, God's power, would be known beyond just Daniel. Could God have given the dream just to Daniel? The vision to Daniel? And then Daniel recorded it? But no, God wanted this to be made known beyond Daniel. There are some visions later on that God gives just to Daniel. But this one, he wanted his power to be made known beyond just Daniel and Daniel's readers. All right, let's keep going. Can somebody read verses 12 through 16? Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Because of this, the king was angry, very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed. And they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king.
All right, thank you. So how does Daniel save himself and all the wise men? He volunteered. Hey, king, give me time. I'll take care of this. But even before that, he speaks with prudence. Again, speaking to those in authority, right? Speaking boldly. Hey, why is the king so urgent? What's the big deal? Oh, well, give me a minute. Let me go talk to the king. King, I'll take care of this for you. Give me a time when I can come back and do this. And he asked for appointed time to tell the king his dream and interpret it. He buys time for the Lord to work. Yeah. Yes. Did the king tell him Daniel's dream? No. No, he says, Daniel goes and says, hey, just I'll do this, but tell me when I want to give me an appointment. Right? He's requesting an appointment from the king. And the king says, great. Thursday at 2:00, you got to come in and do this. Yeah, whatever, whatever that was going to be, there was an appointed time that he might show the interpretation of the king. The king gives him that. And then let's read about what Daniel does. Can somebody read that 17 through 23? Yeah, thanks.
And I told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise. For you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter.
All right, so what does Daniel and his friends do? They pray that God would reveal the dream and its meaning to Daniel. And when God does, what do? Praise. They give thanks. They give adoration to God. And what's what's the substance of that prayer, that praise, that song that they, or whatever that they're saying, that blessing of God? What's the substance? What are they attributing to God? You have authority, wisdom, you're in control of everything, and you reveal even what's going to happen to kings and wise men. God, you are in control of history. And this is one of the themes of Daniel, that God is in control, right? And I just want to take a second here. Talked about this a little bit in Bible class Sunday, but I want to take a second. So if it might be a little bit of a repeat for you if you were there, but I want to just talk a little bit about the difference between, or what God's foreknowledge and God's causing, right? The will of God, that God causes something versus God knowing it's going to happen, right? Does God know everything that's going to happen, has happened, will happen, is happening? Yeah, we call that being omniscient, right? All knowledge. That's the word omniscient. That first part, all omni means all. That shint part is where we get our word science, knowledge, all knowledge. We talk about some of those other things. God is omnipotent, all powerful. He's omnipresent. He's present everywhere. And so that always begs, I always get the question, from kids. Then they're trying to be smart. Well, can God make a rock so big that he couldn't move it? Deal with his omnipotence, right? And I always say, well, God's flippantly, I say back to them, well, God knows everything. He's too smart to even try. So, just flippantly kind of back to them. But God does know everything. Does that mean that God causes everything? No. God allows those things to happen. And then here's the awesome part. God even uses those things for his good, right? So there's that difference between God knowing everything and God causing everything. God doesn't cause evil. He doesn't cause sin. Does God want Nebuchadnezzar to believe in him and the promise of his son and the Savior, the Messiah? Absolutely. Does he know that Nebuchadnezzar will not ultimately and deny him? But does God still use his nation and his kingdom and his power for his glory and his good? Yes.
Perfectly capable of doing simple things on our own.
Yeah, we don't need God to do that sinful stuff for us, but God knows that, but he still, in his mercy and grace, will use those things even for our good. I know that gets kind of mind blowing a little bit. The mind of God is way bigger, and God is bigger than we can fully understand. But just because God knows something is happening, just because God is allowing that to happen, doesn't mean that God is causing that to happen. And it doesn't mean that even as he's not causing it, that he's not still in control, even when that happens. So we'll wrestle with that a little bit more as we read through Daniel, but to kind of help us understand kind of who God is and what he is for us. So is God in control of history? We can say absolutely. Does that mean that he is causing Nebuchadnezzar not to believe in him eventually, or that he caused Nebuchadnezzar to do all these bad things? No, he allowed it, and then he's using it for good. Okay, let's keep going. Daniel 2:24-30. Daniel goes to the king. Let me read that one. Therefore, Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste and said thus to the king, to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. King declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king and said, no wise men, enchanter, magicians, or astrologers can show the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in the bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. So there's a kind of a contrast between the guard and Daniel, right? The guard comes in like, King, I found it. You want to reward me for this. This is really good. I'm really great. What did he do? Nothing. He was going to go kill Daniel. And Daniel said, hey, just give me time. He had patience with Daniel. That's maybe the extent of credit you can give to this guy, right? The king asked Daniel, Daniel, can you interpret the dream? Tell me its interpretation of the dream. Daniel says, nope. Kind of a bold way to start, isn't it? So Daniel, who does he fear more? Nebuchadnezzar or God? Who does he want to give honor and glory to, God or Nebuchadnezzar? God. And so he's very clear in his words. Hey, king, it's not me. Nobody can do this except the true God. And so he's making clear to the king, it's not about me. It's not about my special gifts, abilities, talents. This is all about God. There's a great Latin phrase. I know like 3 of them, but this one is sola dea gloria, or sola dea gloria, however you pronounce that in Latin, right? Maybe you've heard that before. It means to God alone be the glory. I even know some folks that they'll underneath their signature, they put SDG, because sola dea gloria, to God alone be glory. That's how Daniel's living, isn't it? Not me. Not unto us, but to your name be the glory. Yeah, Dad, you have a thought, question, comment?
Yeah, Mary was still in the room as Daniel went. The king is probably regretting that he brought in.
Oh man, what did I do? Why did I take so much credit for this guy? Yeah. Some irony there too, isn't there? Yeah. Bold way to start. Daniel, he has more fear, respect, and love and honor for the Lord than for the king. Again, he's shown, even as he's serving the king, his true allegiance, his true king is not in doubt who that's to. God revealed it so that Nebuchadnezzar would know. Daniel says there's nothing special about me. This is an amazing response by Daniel. He doesn't take credit. To God alone be the glory. Any other thoughts or questions or comments there? Okay. Can somebody read for us then the next section, 31 through 45? A little bit longer, but anybody willing to read that for us? Yeah, go ahead, Mom.
You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was brightness. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floor, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given wherever they dwell, the children of men, beasts of the field, the birds of the heaven, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over the earth. And there shall be a fourth king, strong as iron, because iron breaks pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw, the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage. But they will not hold together, just as iron is mixed with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an, just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no means in hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. Great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure.
Correct. And is Nebuchadnezzar going to trust this interpretation? Why would he have reason to trust it? Because Daniel actually knew the dream without anybody telling him, right? So Nebuchadnezzar wasn't wrong. I mean, it was unreasonable compared to what the other wise men, but now Nebuchadnezzar, he's sure and certain that Daniel knows the interpretation because Daniel also knew the dream. And in the dream, just to describe it again, it's a statue. It has body parts made out of different things. And Daniel says that those body parts each represent a different kingdom, a different dynasty, a different reign, a different group of people that will rule. Nebuchadnezzar's is the most splendid of all the kingdoms. However, it's not the largest. So don't think size or power might that way. As it's described here, it's the most splendid of all the kingdoms. And you might think about that in Babylon. Babylon held one of the wonders of the ancient world. It held the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It was beautiful, majestic. And so King Nebuchadnezzar is splendor and glory in that way. After them comes, there's been kind of two different thoughts of what these kingdoms represent and mean. One of them has been accepted by early Jewish scholars, early Christian scholars, all the way up until the 1800s. It was the predominant view, but there's been a divergent view in the last couple. Prophecy isn't a real thing. And so if it was written, it had to be written after all these things took place. And so they try to move the timeline back a little bit to make it fit their understanding of the world and prophecy. I'm going to give you what the majority of scholars have thought and students of biblical have thought throughout, and what's there, kind of the accepted view of early Jewish scholars and conservative scholars still today. And that's this, the first group. Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold. Daniel tells us that that's easy. After Babylon rules, you have the Persian and the Medes, the empire of the Persians and Medes, the Median Persia. What's next? Bronze? No, silver. That's the chest of silver. And then after them, you have Alexander the Great, the torso of silver. Then after Greece, you have Rome, which is the feet of iron, the strength that's there as that goes. And the brittle, the divided kingdoms, the dividedness that happens eventually in Rome. One of the things that leads credence to that is the thing we haven't talked about yet, this big old rock that comes down and crushes the statue. Right? Who is the rock cut by? Not by human hands, by God. Is sent in the midst of this last kingdom. And this turns into a mountain, a rock that will fill the whole earth and will last forever. What might that be referring to? Jesus, right? Not just the Sunday school answer, right? And to the kingdom that lasts forever, the church, as he reigns and rules forever. When did Jesus come? Well, during the reign and the rule of the Romans, in the midst of that. and not to establish a political kingdom, but a spiritual kingdom that will bring that will rule forever and ever. And eventually, on the last day, so this was partially fulfilled at Jesus' return, or first coming, but it will be fully fulfilled at his return, where God will put all authority under Jesus' feet. All nations will bow down to the Lord in his wisdom and glory and honor. So that's the dream and its interpretation as we look at that. And that's the most accepted way. The other way is that the Medes are one, the Persians are another, and then you get the Greece is the iron, and they weaken themselves and all this kind of stuff, and then they're able to kind of the Jews reclaim their land for a little bit in the midst of that. So
And the clay,
that's not where we're going with today. Yeah, the clay.
what is it?
So the clay, it's just the brittleness of the kingdom, because eventually Rome falls apart too. I mean, it was divided, it was broken. Yeah. Yeah. And eventually we see that in Rome too, as it goes with the East and West and all those kinds of things as well. Yeah, Ron?
I suppose this is where we get that saying about a certain public figure or celebrity has feet of clay.
Feet of clay. Probably just not a firm foundation. Yeah, falls apart. Yeah. Yeah.
But they're talking about ceramics, they're not talking about just unhardened.
Yeah. Yeah. But it doesn't mix, it doesn't bond with the iron. It's not solid. Yeah. All right. So that's the dream, its interpretation. Let's kind of look here at the end. So then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel and commanded that an offering and an incense be offered up to him. Then the king answered and said to Daniel, truly your God is a God of gods and your Lord and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. All right. So how does the king respond? Pretty amazing, right? He's appreciative, to say the least. He praises the God of Daniel, falls down on his face, and kind of gives Daniel and God glory, honor, praise. Does this mean he's a believer in the true God? No. Maybe as much as he believes in any other of the gods that he has. He's not putting them aside. He's not changing his practice. He's at best acknowledging that Daniel's God has great power and authority, which is still pretty amazing. But this is not a faith. This is not something that's going to cause him to change his everyday practices, which we see as the book of Daniel unfolds. Daniel is appointed, is given what kind of positions? Leadership, kind of two main things.
But he's also over the other wise men.
Yeah, so he's given rule of a province, the chief province of the empire of Babylonia, right? And then he's also given authority over all of the wise men, the chief wise men. So some have suggested this connection then to the wise men that we see in the Christmas story. So 500 years later, wise men from the east come to visit Jesus. Well, how would they know enough about Jewish tradition, practice, symbols to even leave the east and come to Jerusalem? Some have suggested that when Daniel was over the wise men, that he may have added in Jewish texts into their learning and what they were learning about. Do we know that for certain? Is it a plausible explanation? Sure. It's kind of fun to think about, but that's where some people will talk about that. That's how that got imported into there. Is that plausible to think about? Daniel's going to bring in some of the writings, the Jewish writings, into their learning and knowledge. Yeah, because they want to know about all the cultures and all the things. So that's very plausible. That's there. So Daniel is appointed to rule the province of Babylon. At Daniel's request, who does he make the leaders? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Interesting, when they were praying in their home, they were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now as they're ruling, they're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel, when he went before the king, what was he called? Belteshazzar. And so I think because of the account that we're going to hear about next time with these three guys, that's how we get their names kind of. If we studied the first story about the four and the food the most, we'd probably call them Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But as we study them in the context before the king, they're using their Babylonian names. That's how they're most known. Okay. All right. Daniel remained court of the king then. All right. Any questions about chapters 1 and 2, about the background of Daniel, about the things that we've talked about today, any of these kinds of things that we've talked about so far before we kind of go through our last 3 questions together? Questions, comments, observations?
It's really nothing thing, but way at the beginning, when they were talking about the people they were bringing from, over from Israel to deportation, I couldn't help but notice that they were, one of the things they were concerned about was young men free from blemish and good to look at.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I think of that as a 2022 problem that we have. I don't think of it as something that would have been some.
And so, yeah, they wanted them not only intelligent and smart, but good looking. Yeah. Well, how was Daniel in these 2 chapters? How is Daniel bold in his faith? Some of the just review. He didn't let others influence him. He kept his identity in God secure. How else?
I'm struck that he made his appointment with Nebuchadnezzar before he, Daniel, even knew for sure that God would.
Yeah. He knew God had given him interpretations of dreams before, and yet he was bold enough in his faith to make the appointment with Nebuchadnezzar without having the interpretation or the dream yet. Yeah, bold in his faith. How else? Any other thoughts? Yeah, Ed?
Well, he asked the king to give his 3 friends,
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, I got a good deal, but,
Let's get these guys that are faithful too, so I'm not alone in this. Yeah, he's wise, isn't he? I mean, he's bold in his faith, but he's also wise. And how he deals with people in authority, asking for his friends, shrewd in the midst of that, you'd almost say. Asking for a trial period, not going to the same supervisor, but going to the next one down and trying a trial period to see what can happen, to see where things are at. And God uses it, right? God uses it to protect Daniel and his friends. God uses it to put Daniel in a position of leadership where he can be protected, but also share and protect his people. And he uses it to make God's name known, not just to the king, but to others as well, even to today. If we're bold in our faith, will we always have the same results as Daniel? No. Right? Does it mean that we're always going to have a supernatural ending to things in our lives? Can God work that way? Sure. But the promise of Daniel, what we learn from Daniel, is not that God's always going to rescue us in the best way possible for me. What we learn from Daniel is God's always going to move his story forward and do what's best and possible for his story so that we're with him forever. And so sometimes that answer might be no. Sometimes we might face difficult consequences. Sometimes we might have someone in authority, no matter how much we are good in speaking with them, that doesn't listen to us or doesn't care. That doesn't mean that God doesn't care or that he's not involved. God will answer things in a different way, but that should not change our boldness of faith. Yeah, Mom?
Just can't help to reiterate again how Daniel in humility went to his friends and they sought the Lord.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we think we're on the right side and maybe are on the right side, But we don't stop to bathe it in prayer, really seek the Lord's
Yeah.
wisdom and guidance. I think it's a good lesson for us to.
Yeah, and that's that last kind of question there. That what do we learn about Daniel in difficult times? That seek prayers from others. Involve our Christian family in those prayers. Support each other. That's not just a one-off conversation. That's an ongoing thing, right? Daniel's friends probably stayed with him the whole night, even as he had that vision and before, because they're there again to praise the Lord afterwards, right? So they're surrounded with those friends during those difficult times to pray boldly toward the Lord and lifting all our concerns to him. Yeah, any other thoughts or questions or comments about first two chapters? Yeah, Gail. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and not discounting those kind of times and experiences and things that they go through in the midst of that. Yeah, how huge that was. And you think about Daniel, as he's growing up and learning these things, even in Jerusalem, that's not what everybody is doing. Yeah, everybody's learning it, but not everybody's putting it into practice. Most of the kings were not. That's why the prophets kept being warned. That's why Babylon was coming, because the people in general weren't being faithful. But Daniel and his friends, they took these lessons to heart. They believed them and stayed firm in them. All right. Well, let's go ahead and close with prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and the blessings you give to us. Lord, we ask you to continue to be present, to continue to rule over all things. Lord, help us to be faithful in the midst of struggles, just as Daniel would. Help us to faithfully pass on what we know to others, to boldly witness in the midst of all things. Give us strength, give us boldness. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your day.